All right, still with me, civil rights and appellate attorney Mark Bignard and former criminal defense attorney Kirk Nurmian. Mark, let me start with you. I mean, this whole part of this pretrial practice, big important part of these cases, a lot happens here. I can't help but feel like the defense here is attempting to control the narrative somewhat. This is the second time that they're claiming and exclaiming about possible exculpatory evidence. They did it with the surviving roommate, wanting to depose her and talk to her, so they're going to travel out there and talk to her. Now they're doing it here. That's my feeling. Your thoughts?
I think you're probably right. I mean, I think there's the two things going on. First, they do want all of the evidence that they can get, right? They want to know the entire state's file. They want to see what's in there, exculpatory, inculpatory, whatever. But I also think that they are making, they know that this isn't happening in a vacuum, that there's a lot of media coverage on this. And so they know that the more noise that they make about there's going to be exculpatory evidence, we don't know what all the evidence shows. I think that does set a narrative, especially in a case like this, where the only evidence is circumstantial, and it's not like there is a link between Mr. Kohberger and any of these alleged victims. And so given that you've got this circumstantial case, it makes a lot of sense to get out in front and say, look, there's a lot of evidence that we don't know about.
Kirk, and I understand what Mark is saying, but my point is they've got 10,000 pages already, 10,000 photos. They have 9,200 tips they need to go through, and those could be helpful. You never know what's going to be in there. There's no body cam footage, but apparently there's 51 terabytes of information that involves all kinds of different reports, that involves video evidence, all types of things. There's no way they've gone through all that to figure out the fact that there's nothing exculpatory and they want anything to be handed over. I think it's definitely something that they're doing purposefully.
Well, look, I'm going to push back a little bit, Mike, because remember, this is a potential death penalty case here, and there's no limits on the scope of information. The fact that X amount has been disclosed really means nothing if they feel like there's other things in the investigation that could be exculpatory or maybe perhaps mitigating when we talk about that mitigation phase in death penalty. So they're very, and keep in mind, too, when we talk about a death penalty case, the defense attorneys, they have a certain requirement of diligence and zeal in order for any conviction or any death sentence to hold up, and we could be doing it again. So they are right to go after every single bit of evidence that they possibly might think. And of course, they have another source of information. Their client, what is their client telling them? What does he see? So there's every reason for the defense to move forward as aggressively as possible, not only in the court of public opinion, but ultimately in front of those 12 jurors that are going to decide the fate of their client.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Can't argue with that. Well, a couple of interesting things we found out from the paperwork. There was, in fact, an interview of Kohberger by the lead detective, Detective Payne. There are lab reports of forensic evidence. And if you remember, there was a fingerprint found on the sheet. There was also some hair found in his apartment that was dog hair, which may match the dog that was found in the place where the murders happened. But here's what I found interesting, Mark. The state fought back. They're saying, look, we've turned over everything. We have an obligation to turn over exculpatory evidence. We haven't seen any. If you've seen any, let us know, because we're not aware of any.
You hear that. I have heard that a lot in my practice. When we're talking about discovery Brady material, the state's always saying, well, if you think it's exculpatory, tell us. Well, we, as the defense attorney, you're like, well, we don't know. We don't know what's in your file. Like, I can't tell you why your evidence is exculpatory, but you have an obligation to give me everything.
You know what's interesting, Kirk, and as I said earlier, please explain to our viewers. Well, let me ask you this. These numbers I'm throwing out, 10,000 pages of reports, 10,000 photos, 92,000 tips. How does an attorney sit down and get through all of that information? Because as you said, death penalty case, zealous representation, you got to work your way through this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it just takes a dedication to your client and your situation. And boy, you do have to go through it. I mean, it is a long 12, 14-hour days. You've got a gluttony of information, electronic data. I've been there. That's why these death penalty cases take so long to get to trial. People are frustrated. But when you have that amount of evidence and the defense attorney has an obligation, they're putting in a lot of work, and they're having to review that and digest that as best they can. So they are providing effective assistance assistance of counsel because, Michael, most death penalty cases, if they get overturned, it's going to be at that sentencing phase because the defense attorneys didn't present certain information. So it's not just a matter of the case. We talk about all that evidence, but it's also that mitigating information. That's why, typically you have two attorneys, you have investigators, things like that, because it takes a lot to get a death penalty case to trial and to provide your client with diligent representation.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a lot of work on both sides, Mark. So my question for you is, oftentimes when we see this type of motion practice, things going back and forth, once everybody gets a real sense of what's out there, what their case is, or it isn't, negotiations kind of pick up. You think there's a possibility of a plea in this case?
I think that if you've got a case that is a potential death case, there's always going to be a universe where that can happen, right? If the alternatives are to be executed in custody versus some type of a life sentence, life with parole, life without parole, there's obviously always going to be a math on the part of the district attorney and on the part of defense counsel and the person who's charged with the crime over whether to consider, pleading to something lesser. So I think that's definitely on the table. It's always on the table, but it really is. I mean, as you're saying, you got to wait to see how everything shakes out. Wait to see how strong the case is on the state side. See how strong the defense's side is before really getting into that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of posturing going on right now. All right, Mark Kirk, stand by when we come back. After his first trial ended in a deadlock, a new jury could soon reach a verdict in the second rape trial of actor Danny Masterson. We'll tell you all about it. Keep it right here on Court TV Live.
I started hearing these stories about murder.
Go deep inside the dark world of true crime.
We knew that what we were doing had consequences, but we just didn't care.
Vice on Court TV, tonight at 7/6 Central.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, diving deeper into the case against Corey Richards. It's a mystery full of surprises, and our legal experts will break it all down.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
I started hearing these stories about murder and stuff.
I'm about to be the biggest drug dealer that you can become.
Oh my God, are they starting a war with me or what?
I'm not gonna lie, it felt good to be a gangster.
She just points the gun out of my face. Boom, 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 boom. Just shoots me.
We knew that what we were doing had consequences, but we just didn't care.
Vice on Court TV, tonight at 7/6 Central, only on Court TV.
Topping our other legal news from across the nation, in California, the rape retrial of actor Danny Masterson is winding down. Both sides presented closing arguments today. Now, he is accused of drugging and raping 3 women at his home in Los Angeles between 2001 and 2003. Masterson is a member of the Church of Scientology, and all the alleged victims are former members of the church. Now, during the trial, the judge allowed a former member of the church's leadership to testify about the institution's policies about reporting crimes to police. The women testified that church officials prevented them from going to authorities about the rape claims, which the church denied. Masterson's first trial ended in a deadlock. If convicted, he could face up to 45 years in prison. Masterson is best known for his role in the television sitcom That 70s Show. In Kansas, a judge has granted a request by Jackson Mahomes to have contact with 3 of the 4 people listed as witnesses against him in his sexual battery case. Those 4 people are also his friends. Jackson was back in court today for his bond modification hearing. The conditions of his bond initially said he could not have any contact with witnesses in the case. The judge ruled that he could, but also cautioned them not to have any discussions about the case. The alleged incident happened at Aspen's restaurant in February and was caught on video. According to court documents, the female owner of the restaurant says Mahomes grabbed her by the throat, forced her head back, and kissed her 3 times. She told police she did not consent to the contact. Mahomes will be back in court August 31st for a preliminary hearing. Jackson is the brother of NFL star quarterback Patrick Mahomes. And in California, murdered or missing? That's the question being asked as adoptive parents Trezell and Jacqueline West, who are on trial for the deaths of their adopted sons, Oren and Orson. The toddlers were reported missing back in December of 2020 from their California City home. But prosecutors believe they were murdered 3 months prior. Their bodies have yet to be found. For more on this tragic case, here's Court TV legal correspondent Julia Jeanette.
I don't understand. I just want my babies. If they find them, just give them back to me, please. That's all I want.
A desperate plea from a mother for her two young sons, Orrin, age 4, and Orson, age 3. Family members remember the brothers as happy babies who loved to laugh. They were reported missing on December 21st, 2020 by their adoptive parents.
Trezell West and Jacqueline West reported to the California City Police Department that the boys had disappeared from their backyard.
Trezell and Jacqueline West held a press conference 2 days later, asking for the public's help in finding the boys.
Tell us what happened the night the kids went missing.
My wife's inside. She was actually wrapping gifts, so we thought it was a good idea that our youngest two go outside and play with chalk on the back patio. I came back out. I didn't see them now. Asked my wife, did you see the boys? She said no. I started searching my backyard. I searched the whole thing. I realized that I left the gate open, and I panicked.
We just want to thank everybody.
We really want to thank you guys.
Please, if anybody has seen them, please call, let somebody know.
Some in the crowd listening to the Wests didn't like what they were hearing and began asking questions.
Y'all say y'all came out looking for the kids, and y'all got neighbors that say y'all ain't even came out looking for no kids. The neighbors weren't out here.
We were looking.
We were looking.
I have 9 kids.
But they was outside in the backyard that I was watching.
Leave my kids unattended, not even for a minute.
The boys' biological mother, Ryan Dean, lost custody of them in 2016 after taking Orrin to the hospital for a broken leg. Authorities suspected her of child abuse. She attempted several times unsuccessfully to regain custody. Dean says during her visits with the kids, she noticed they were losing weight and had unexplained scratches.
If they find my kids, can they just give them back to me? Whatever I have to do to work on it, to get them. I have a home, I have a car, I have a job, I have money. I just hope they're okay.
News of the missing boys galvanized the community.
Where are the boys? No boys, no me! Where are the boys? No boys, no me!
And hundreds of people from around the country also joined in the effort to find the lost brothers.
There was some elements that stood out about the foster families' interviews that pretty much compelled me to participate and come out and do what we could to help find both of these boys.
Multiple searches turned up no sign of Orrin and Orson. In March, more than a year after police were contacted, adoptive parents Trezell and Jacqueline West were arrested.
I'm saddened to announce that the investigation has revealed that Orrin and Orson West are deceased. The investigation has also revealed that they died 3 months before their adoptive parents reported them missing.
They were charged with second-degree murder, child abuse, and false reporting of an emergency. The couple pleaded not guilty and deny any involvement in the boys' disappearance.
While the defendants in this case, Trezell and Jacqueline West, are presumed innocent, the securing of a grand jury indictment is a major step in ensuring that there will be justice for Orrin and Orson.
The bodies of these two little boys still have not been found, and their biological mother is left with an unimaginable void.
I miss their smile. I miss the way I used to play with them during visits. I miss just being there. I just miss being their mother, and it was taken from me.
Now, the trial against the West parents is nearing its end. Closing arguments are going on today. All right, still with me, civil rights and appellate attorney Mark Begnard and former criminal defense attorney Kirk Nerman. And Kirk, I'll start with you because you know a little something about defending a parent against charges of their child missing or murdered. And clearly, no one knows better than you. It is an uphill battle.
Yeah, you know, when we talk about what we hear, the death 3 months prior to the reporting missing, right? And the lack of diligence. We saw this in Vallow, right? I mean, it wasn't this extravagant trip to Hawaii, but certainly their indifference to their missing children is all demonstrative of guilt. I think we're going to see a pretty rapid verdict here, and that these parents will both be convicted for the murders of these two beautiful young boys.
Yeah, Kirk hit the nail on the head there, Mark. It's all about those 3 months. If you're a defense attorney, that's where I think you've got to attack the case. How did they determine that the kids were gone 3 months before they were reported missing? It seems odd that no one else would have known these kids were missing. There were others in their lives. We saw their biological mother there talking. So that's the area, I think, where if you're going to have any success at all, that's where you got to go.
Sure. I mean, on the side of the defense or the state, if you're proving the case up and for the state, you've got to account for that 3 months and make sure that the defense isn't going to, have witnesses that are going to come in and say, oh, no, I babysat for the kids in that time period. That there isn't anybody that says that. I think that's the point you're kind of driving at, that there isn't anybody who can come in and say that they saw these boys in those 3 months is pretty devastating for the defense, I think. And I'm going to agree with Kirk here that I think we're going to see a pretty quick verdict.
Yeah, once you do that investigation, and that's the conclusion, I'm not sure. All right, let's turn to the Jackson Mahomes case. It was an interesting request by the defendant. He wanted the opportunity to talk to some of the witnesses. They're his buddies. The judge gave them an admonition, but he did allow them to talk. Were you surprised by that, Kirk?
Definitely surprised. I mean, if someone is charged with a crime like that, to be released, and the release conditions always generically say you can't have contact with the victim, the witnesses, etc. And now he's allowed to have this contact and potentially coach these witnesses. And this admonition may or may not mean anything between him and his buddy. So there's a real possibility here that he has a chance to affect the case. And no, I don't think it ever should have been granted whatsoever.
Yeah, and Mark, the big question is, how do you police that? I guess you can bring them in as witnesses and ask them if they've talked about it under oath, but it sounds difficult.
Yeah, there's no policing this. I'm with Kirk on this. I'm really surprised to have seen that this was the ruling. But, we're not talking about family members. We're not talking about somebody that you live with. These are his buddies. And for the judge to, and they're witnesses in a very serious case. And for the judge to allow contact with witnesses in a very serious case is surprising at a minimum.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Them not being family members in any way, that's what surprised me about it. All right, folks, coming up, video of an alleged shoplifter being shot by an armed security guard inside a San Francisco Walgreens has sparked outrage and protests, along with the decision that the security guard won't be charged in the case. We wanted to know what you thought of that move by the DA. Up next, we read some of your comments left on our Court TV social media pages. That's next here on Court TV.
I started hearing these stories about murder.
Go deep inside the dark world of true crime.
We knew that what we were doing had consequences, but we just didn't care.
Vice on Court TV, next.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, diving deeper into the case against Corey Richards. It's a mystery full of surprises, and our legal experts will break it all down.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
It is time now for today's Talkback segment. Each day, we post a question on Court TV's social media pages. We gather your comments and questions and respond right here on the show. Now, in San Francisco, an alleged shoplifter was shot and killed by a security officer over $14 worth of merchandise. The DA's office has decided not to file charges, so we asked you, what do you think of the district attorney's decision? Here to discuss, civil rights and appellate attorney Mark Begnard and former criminal defense attorney Kirk Nerby. All right, gentlemen, our first comment comes from Darryl. Darryl says the security guard was definitely the aggressor. He was proving a point. The DA got it wrong. I hope there is a wrongful death civil suit on the victim's behalf. And certainly, approach to this civilly is coming. I can tell you that right now. But at the end of the day, Mark, if you got a chance to look at this video, I'd love to get your thoughts on it, because I tend to agree with Carolyn. To me, the security guard was the aggressor here, had control of the situation, but again, he claims that he felt a threat to his life, that the person was threatening to stab him. No knife was found, but your thoughts?
I agree with you, Michael. I mean, my heart goes out to Banko Brown and his family. I watched the video in anticipation of being on your show this evening, and I played back the last seconds over and over, and what I see is Banko Brown walking out of the store when the shots are fired. That's what I see. I mean, other people may see it differently, but that's what I see. So I don't understand the decision not to charge, quite frankly. And 100% you're going to see a civil suit. I mean, that's what I do. I do, civil rights litigation. So we do police shootings, and there's going to be a civil suit. And I pray that on behalf of the family, it's successful.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And just to give it a little context, San Francisco has had major problems with crime in their downtown area, major retailers leaving the area in droves. Target has had to put all its merchandise behind fiberglass because it's gotten so bad out there. This DA ran on a ticket of being tough on crime. All of that might have played into it. Our next comment comes from Carolyn. Carolyn says, this is not a victimless crime. When you shoplift, you are stealing. Theft, robbery, etc. is not a right to walk into a store and steal. It is no different than breaking into someone's home and stealing. End of story. The victim got what he deserved. I don't even know where to begin, Kirk. I'm going to let you talk about that comment. So many things that I think are wrong in that, but I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with you. There is a lot wrong with that. The idea of shooting someone for shoplifting is so unpalatable to me. I can't even imagine. So I can't connect to anything that is being proffered in that statement. The only thing I would say when we talk about the lack of charging, and we obviously know the civil suit is coming, we have to look at remember the reasonableness of the situation. We don't know what was said. We have somebody saying that they were threatened to be stabbed. Given the environment you talked about, is that person's response, is the security guard's response reasonable? And I think the prosecutors like to charge, right? Tough on crime. That's what every prosecutor wants to be and be seen as. But if there is not a reasonable probability of a conviction, then the just thing to do is not charge. And they believe in their prosecutorial discretion that charges would not result in a conviction, and that's appropriate not to put someone through this, regardless of what the court of public opinion might believe.
You know, we do have some words from the security guard. He did speak with police, gave an interview. Here's a little bit of that interview as he describes, from his point of view, what happened at the time of the shooting.
I picked up my weapon out of my holster, and I had it faced towards the ground. I didn't have no intentions on just going straight to shoot because I didn't feel like I was totally in imminent danger until she advanced towards me.
All right, so you heard that. He had his gun pointed to the ground. He felt he was in danger. She came toward him. Our next comment comes from Jamie. Jamie says, I disagree. That security guard is not a judge, jury, or executioner. We don't kill people for stealing. This isn't the Middle Ages. And again, Mark, I go back to the question, why not let a jury decide? Why not let the community decide if what he did was reasonable?
I agree with you. And again, after watching the video, what I see is, I mean, again, it's just my opinion, but what I see is that that Banko Brown is not coming towards Michael Anthony when he shoots. And so, I mean, that's what I see. And I think that probably illustrates your point that, why not leave it up to a jury? Why does the DA make the decision unilaterally instead of allowing the jurors to look at the video themselves and see what they think?
Yeah, no doubt. This is a tough one, no doubt. I don't want to rush to judgment, but again, I'm with you, Mark. What I see certainly is something that might work its way through the system and would benefit from a judgment by his community. All right, Mark Bernard and Kirk Norby, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Truly appreciate it. Folks, coming up next, we're going to review the 3 things we've learned today in the cases we've been covering from coast to coast, right here on Court TV. Welcome back. Here